But let's keep it moving to the defensive side of the ball. Same thing, same concept. I'm not here to like talk about 3 technique, 5 technique type guys. But just in terms of the defensive linemen, I think will contribute the most. I think Christian Miller was just massive to get to stay for this year. I've talked at links already about how much Georgia lost on the defensive line from the 2024 team. So to get Christian Miller to come back, I think he's going to be that biggest impact player on the defensive line. But in the middle, Xavier McLeod, I think really he's the one that really improved his play down the stretch. I was really impressed with Xavier McLeod. He was one of the better linemen in that SEC championship game against Texas. So I was really I was glad to see McLeod come back as well. And then Joseph Jonah Ajonye, he had the injury that kept him out last season, but this guy was a top 10 player in the country in that 2024 class. And I think unfortunately we might be relying a lot on that 2024 class here in 2025 because Joseph Jonah Ajonye is a guy who's just a freak on this defense line. I use that word too often, but I think big number 99, I want to see this guy become one of Georgia's impact players next year. Like I think we're going to see him be one of the better linemen. I think Jordan Hall is a guy Georgia fans in the country coming out, I believe in the 2023 class. He's had some injuries to this point, so we haven't really gotten to see what he can do. I think he's a candidate, as well as Justin Green from Mountain View, near my neck of the woods. I'm really excited to see him. This is one thing I say about Georgia, and I think my actual my literal comment was in reference to Malachi Starks a couple years ago, that Georgia is a team that doesn't need freshmen to contribute most years. But if they do get one to contribute, then it's just kind of a cherry on top situation. And I feel like that's what Malachi Starks was. Like, I think Georgia probably could win the national championship in 2022 without Malachi Starks playing a big role, right? Like, not to disrespect his contribution to the team, but they just didn't need a true freshman to step in right away and start every game at safety. But not one, and he was a big playmaker, and it just made their really good defense that much better. And it feels like that's kind of what Georgia is typically like. That's typically what it is. Like a Jalen Carter was a guy who's just a stud from year one back in 2020, but you didn't necessarily need him to be that guy. And so right now, I think Georgia might need one of those guys. And Elijah Griffin was number 1 defensive lineman in the country coming out of high school. Oh man, who's the other one we missed on? Justice Terry, who ended up going to Texas. Like Georgia may have needed 2 guys to come in and be, instant impact players on the defensive line, because they don't have a lot. There's not a lot of proven talent on that defensive line right now. So I think if Elijah Griffin came in and was just a star from day one and was one of Georgia's starters, I think that would be massive in terms of this team accomplishing what they want to accomplish. Because I was on here a week ago, being Debbie Downer, talking about like this most unproven Georgia team I can remember under Kirby Smart. And a week later, I see an ESPN article with the playoff prediction for 2025 or the 2026 playoff, I guess. And Georgia was the predicted number 1 seed. So I don't know. Maybe there's the national people have a little more faith in Georgia than I do. But I think if that's going to happen, I think it's going to take some guys that either, weren't on this team a year ago, some transfers or some freshmen, or some guys that haven't played a big role that step into a role and just flourish with it. So Elijah Griffin, maybe he's that guy that can come along, and that's what those 5 stars are at times. They are difference makers, and Elijah Griffin, if he could come in for Georgia, that would be a big time difference maker. And then at the edge spot, I think Gabe Harris. This is the other spot that worries me. Gabe Harris, I think, is by far your most proven guy there. You lose, Michael Williams kind of played the edge spot and kind of on the defensive line, but you lose Chaz Chambliss, you lose Jalen Walker, who's kind of a hybrid as well, inside outside guy. But those were Georgia's best pass rushers a year ago, and so Gabe Harris is definitely the most proven guy in that group. You also Damon Wilson was one of the better edge rushers a year ago for this group. He's going to be playing for Missouri this year, and so Quintavious Johnson. He's the guy that is just a super dynamic athlete. He's like barely played defense, or I think he played linebacker. I think his life. He was a quarterback in high school, but this guy just a freaky athlete from what people talk about. So I'll have to find another synonym for the people on the next show. I've said that too many times already, but yeah, this is another spot that most years Georgia doesn't need a freshman to come in right away. But this might be a spot that you might need one of those freshmen to come in and be an instant impact guy. And so you look at guys like Isaiah Gibson or Chase Linton. Like I think Chase Linton, just looking at his frame, kind of, he looks like one of those guys that probably has to put some weight on before you see him. Like those guys tend to not be instant impact guys as freshmen. And in general, the defensive line, I don't know. Maybe it's something about the physicality that Georgia brings. Like I just tend to not rely too much on true freshmen when it comes on those defensive line edge rusher type spots. But Georgia might need it in this 2020 on the 2025 team, because I think Gabe Harris and Quintavious Johnson are the only guys that have gotten real snap, and Quintavious Johnson probably hasn't gotten real snaps to this point. So, that's an interesting group. And then Mike 3883 chiming in the group chat, hit the like, and I endorse that. That comment, Mike. I appreciate you tuning into the live show. Feel free to tell me what's on your mind, Mike, and we can talk about it. That inside, let's keep it going with the depth chart. The inside linebacker position, CJ Allen and Raylan Wilson, the most proven guys in that room. But I think you're kind of going to see another like 3 linebackers play the same number of snaps. And I think in 2025, CJ Allen, Raylan Wilson, and Chris Cole will basically play the same number of snaps. And Georgia just loves to rotate guys, get the right personnel in, and just figure out a way to get the most linebackers on the field, because we've seen the way this team recruits. Like the linebackers are consistently the highest ranked recruits on this team. So yeah, I think you're going to see the 3 of those guys really play kind of an equal number of snaps in 2025. And I think Justin Williams is that next guy that I see, being a contributor in that inside linebacker room. But I think that's by far the strongest position on Georgia's team going into 2025 is that inside linebacker room. And then you go to the cornerback spot. Dalen Everett, I think, is one of the more proven starters on this team. And then Daniel Harris kind of took control of that cornerback spot, that cornerback 2 spot in the final few games of the season. But Ellis Robinson, and everyone loves to see the 5-star, but man, this guy was just so big time coming out of high school. I really want to see Ellis Robinson get on the field and see what this guy can do. I think Daniel Harris, I think, will unfortunately be one of those guys that kind of the Quinn Ewers. It's not nearly as big time as Quinn Ewers. Everyone wants Arch Manning sort of thing, but Ellis Robinson is the one that I definitely want to see what this guy can do. I mean, people talk about this guy going up against Jeremiah Smith in high school, and if that's the case, I want to see Jeremiah Smith is the best receiver in college football for my money. So I want to see what the guy looks like that is actually capable of guarding him. So Maybe we get to see more of Ellis Robinson in 2025. And then I think DeMello Jones is probably that next corner that's played, a little bit, but you hear a lot about this guy in practice. So I think that's a potential right there. At the star position, I think Janelle Aguero feels like the obvious guy at that position. And then the safety spot, I think it's going to be KJ Bolden and one of the transfers. And so the transfer, is it Jaden Harris from Miami? Is it Justin Maddox? Is that his name? Am I making that up? Out of UAB, that transfer, or Zion Branch. I think you're going to see one of the starting, which I think they have said is kind of suited for that star position, more of a physical kind of safety like that. So, I think it's interesting. Let me see. Am I saying it? Adrian Maddox, Justin. I don't who's Justin Maddox. I'm Samsonite. But let's see here. So yeah, I think KJ Bolden and one of the transfers will be the starter. I think the other option to start in the safety room that's already at Georgia is Ja'Cory Thomas. You saw him play a little bit of that star position a year ago, but it looked like he got pulled pretty early in that Clemson game. And then you saw a lot more of Malachi Starks playing that star role, and Bolden and Dan Jackson in the safety spots. So I think Ja'Cory Thomas is an option at safety, probably not at star. But yeah, I think KJ Bolden, if there's one player on Georgia's roster that would surprise me the least if we're looking up, and a guy is a first team All-American in 2025, I think KJ Bolden is that candidate. I think I've talked a lot about how unproven this team feels in 2025, going into 2025. But there are some guys, that it would not surprise you if they took their game to the next level. And KJ Bolden is definitely one of those guys. So yeah, and if it's Maddox, Branch, or Harris, I think one of those guys will start at the other spot, and then maybe even see him in that star position. Aguero's been a guy who has had some injuries in his couple years in Athens, so hopefully he's able to stay on the field, because he looked like he was really starting to come along last season, and he made some of those plays that Tyke Smith made so well, and Javon Bullard made so well. Just were just being shot out of a cannon and hitting some of those throws to the flat in the backfield. Like, those are the plays that excited me so much. Javon Bullard, one of my all-time favorite dogs, the star position on that 2022 team, and just call him the star in general. Defensive player of the game in both playoff games that year, and in the national championship. So Javon Bullard, all-time damn good dog for sure. But that's all I have. And then the last one, I think the leading return man on this team, maybe punt, maybe kick, definitely punt. I don't know. Kick return tend to be, seems like we have running backs at that kick return spots lots of times. But we'll see who Georgia has at the kick return. But I think the leading punt return will be Zachariah Branch. This guy looked super explosive returning punts for USC as a freshman. So I'm hoping we get to see a little more freshman Zachariah Branch than we did as a sophomore a year ago, because this guy definitely has big play potential, and he's going to be an exciting guy to watch in this Georgia offense.